Alrighty, so today we're doing a Patreon voted drawn out. I had put up a poll for patrons and they voted on the option for me to draw the kid of one of my favorite RWBY ships. They did not know that that RWBY ship is Qrow x Tai, so Taiyang and Qrow. We're rolling with the idea that this is a fantasy world, so two men can just have a baby. Because I want to have fun, and who cares? It's a fantasy world. Let's just have the men have a kid together. So yeah, that's who we're designing. If you pay attention, you'll notice on my reference sheet I don't just have Qrow and Tai on my image like that I'm using as a reference, but also RWBY and Yang, because I didn't want her to look too dissimilar or too similar to what would be her sisters. What I'm doing here is, I was figuring out where I wanted her pigtails, because I knew I wanted her to have pigtails, but the first option, like the really high ones, they looked a little too much like Cinder when she was like in her flashback that we get to see in Volume 8. But moreover, it just felt a little too spunky, and I wanted this character to look more kind of, meek. And I do that a couple of times throughout this design process where I like how I just did. I thought about maybe going with a short in the front and long in the back vest here, but then I was like, what if it's just all long? And so I'd whipped up a quick version of both options so I can see which I liked better. I liked the idea of her having this long vest because then it kind of conveys the same silhouette as Qrow's cape. I think, so the fairy tale that she's based off of is The Ugly Duckling, and so she's not ugly. I actually think she ends up pretty dang cute. But I'm interpreting ugly as more of, unconfident. My idea for this character would be that she is not really sure what she wants to do. She's not quite as gifted as her sisters. She's also the youngest in this alternate universe, I guess. She's not as confident as her sisters. She does not have the silver eyes, not as naturally gifted at fighting as RWBY and Yang. And that's what makes her quote-unquote ugly. Here's another one where I'm working with options. I had thought about at first going with shorts for her, because I knew I didn't want a skirt, but the shorts felt too much was happening all up in that area. Honestly, her pants, figuring out what I wanted to do with her legs was one of the harder options for me. Her name, by the way, is Quill. This is Quill Branwen that I'm drawing here. Figured, we've already got a Rose and a Xiaolong. Might as well roll with Qrow's last name to keep these half-sisters all just real dang confusing. Oh man, do you like how I just erased a perfectly fine shoe to replace him with another perfectly fine shoe that may not even be at the right angle still? I don't design children characters too often, but I think it's a lot of fun, because you're trying to incorporate elements from both of the parents in a way that is cohesive. That belt does not stay. But yeah, you want to incorporate elements from both parents in a way that is cohesive, and that clearly evokes the feel of both parents, preferably, while not just looking like a fusion of the parents. I think RWBY is a bad example, because she's just Summer Rose again. And Yang is an acceptable example because her design without any color very much is just like a gender swap of her dad, but then with the colors of her mom, which is totally a viable option. But I wanted to try to incorporate elements from both Qrow and Tai in Quill's design here, in a way that still makes her feel like her own character. I didn't want her to just be a Qrow x Tai knockoff, I wanted her to feel distinct. And I think I convey that pretty well. Elements that I try to pay attention to what both of the men wear. She's got that kind of bigger collar because both Qrow and Tai have large collars in their designs. She's got a vest because both of them wear vests. And also, I try to think about how, like, her character. In my head, she's very, you know, a bit of a, not quite a daddy's girl, but she looks up to her dads, and, you know, they teach her a lot. You know, she's learned everything about, like, fighting and Grim and everything through them, and so her gear, like, this would be what she would wear when she's, like, either at school or hunting monsters or whatever it is. So her gear would take after them. For example, she's got one gloved hand, because RWBY loves having uneven gloves. But moreover, because Tai has one gloved hand, and I figured he would teach her, like, keep your dominant arm more protected, because it's the one that'll be more likely to get hurt in a fight, you know? So, things like that. A kid who is more distant from their parents may strive to differentiate themselves from their parents. So, like, if you're making a child character who really doesn't get along with their parents, that's where you kind of look at what they do and go in the opposite direction. This is fun, I love her hair. Because both of, you know, RWBY and Yang, so both of Tai's other children, their hair fades. Yang's is supposed to fade to a lighter yellow. It doesn't really anymore, because they really want to, like, cheap out on doing Yang's hair. But it's supposed to. In all the concept art, it does fade to a lighter yellow. And RWBY's hair, of course, fades to red. And so I figured I'd follow through with that with little Quill here. And so yeah, her color is brown. That is her color. And I decided to have it fade to a darker shade, so more of a Qrow hair color black. To help her look a little bit more distinct from her sisters, you know, it's not getting lighter like how Yang's does. So yeah, her main color is brown, and I toyed with the idea of putting white on her as well. You may have seen that for a sec there. But it wasn't really looking great with the other colors on her. So I opted instead to just roll with, you know, the browns and blacks, and then have the one nice tasty pop of orange. Because so I didn't want to deviate too far away from the brown shades for her. So, you know, I didn't want to give her a pop of blue or green or something like that. And so I wanted to stick with the warm colors, and, well, you know, Tai is very yellow, but Qrow has his red eyes and, like, red cape, so, hey, maybe why not meet in the middle a little bit, you know? The hardest thing to figure out the color for was her eyes, because I didn't know what I would want, because I didn't want to just do a Yang again, and because Yang has purple eyes, because Taiyang has blue eyes, and her mom has red eyes, and if you mix red and blue, you get purple. And I think that's fun and stupid, but I didn't want to just do that again. So I saved Quill's eyes for last here, so I could figure out the rest of her palette. Because while I knew I wanted her main color to be brown, and I figured I'd probably have a fair number of blacks in her design as well, I wasn't confident on the other elements yet. So that's why I saved the eyes for last. I opted for kind of a red-brown. So again, I'm not deviating too far out from my color palette, without also just pulling a Yang on this one. So Quill is the ugly duckling, and my idea for that would be that as she matured as a woman, you know, as she got older, she would incorporate more whites into her design. Because in the story, the duckling, you know, oh, it's an ugly duckling, and then it learns at the end that it's actually a swan. And, you know, swans are white birds. So I wouldn't want her to, like, shift main color. Like, her primary color will always be brown, but perhaps all the black elements in her design would eventually shift into more of a white. So then, you know, to help signify, you know, that swan element for her. So I've technically finished drawing her. But I wanted to have a little bit of fun. I've never done this before, where included with a concept design. I have like little doodles of the character doing things. But it felt like fun, and I wanted to show off things like her weapon and, you know, her in motion, her with her sisters. So that's what these are. This is also when I'm starting to get a little tired. I had been going for a couple hours now, so you're gonna see some pretty ugly faces on Qrow and Taiyang when I draw them here. So get excited for that. Yeah, so eventually she would turn more into a swan, in terms of like color palette. And yeah, in regards to the character being the ugly duckling, like I mentioned, it'd be more of an unconfident thing. And I'm not sure if she would be a fighter. Like, I think she could fight, but I don't know if that's what she wants to do. You know, I've designed her at the beginning of her story, basically. This is her starting point. And so, I don't know, maybe, it's not like I've thought out the entire character's, you know, like full arc or anything. But her primary goal, like, were she to be introduced in like a manga or spin-off or whatever it would be, yeah, her quest is to figure out what she wants to do. Does she want to be a huntress like her dads and sisters, or is that just what people all kind of expect out of her? That's her plot. So yeah, I think I really am happy with her design. I do realize that it looks a lot like Qrow. She definitely takes after Qrow a bit more than Tai, but I think that's okay because Yang looks so much like Tai that it was alright to lean in on the Branwen side. Yeah, I think she looks good with her theoretical sisters. You know, none of them look particularly related at a glance. You know, none of them have the same hair or eye colors or anything like that. They're all totally different body shapes. But they look cohesive together. You know, like, the faded hair all helps for them. So, as long, and you know, since I gave Quill browns and an orange kind of highlight, but then also sort of red eyes, and then lots of blacks in her design, you know, she looks good standing next to either of her sisters. You know, she's got colors that are incorporated in both of their, at least, original designs. I didn't really care to consider the newer ones because, well, I don't really like any of the newer outfits. So yeah, I know, you know, having her look good next to her siblings wasn't, like, one of the main things I cared to keep track of while I was designing her, but it was nice to try to keep that in the back of my mind, you know, cause I did think about her being close to her family, and so this is all a very close-knit family, you know, whoever's left in it, you know, Raven doesn't really count. So yeah, I definitely didn't want her to look like she didn't belong. These little doodles, so you may notice that I'm not doing a secondary rough sketch. You know, I've got my red-brown, like, base sketch where I figure out where their bodies are going and everything. And usually I've got my second rough sketch in blue, and that's the one where I, like, figure out where their hair is and their face and have all that, figure out how that's all working. And I'm not doing that. I'm jumping straight to line art with these. One, because I didn't want to spend, like, 5 days on this project. But also, two, this is a very similar sort of process that I would do for 2 different things. First, this is very, very, reminiscent of when I would doodle in my notebooks back when I was still in school. This is the ugly faces, get ready. Ugh. And you know, doodling and sketching in your notebook is a really good way to keep your hand fluid and keep yourself from being too, like, stiff while illustrating. But secondly, you know, it's kind of similar to how I'm making my comics, because I can't spend an eternity on my comics. And when you're doing something like comic work, you have to draw the same characters over and over again relatively quickly. And so doing this, just as practice, you know, it teaches you how to render the character quickly over and over. You know, I got used to starting with Quill's collar and then doing the, you know, the sleeves from there. You learn all the elements that need to be repeated. And doing this, you know, a basic rough and then straight to line art is a good way to teach yourself how to think about things more loosely in terms of design. So yeah, and here's some, you know, just some simple shading for these. So these little doodles are pretty fun. They don't look as pretty as the full color version. These are gonna be in grayscale, and I'll talk about that in a sec. You know, they're not the prettiest things on earth. They are just little doodles. But I think they're really cute. I think my favorite is definitely her with her sword. Just cause, so, you know, it's fun drawing a character standing around a vague background, looking pretty. You know, I like designing characters. But I think it's just as, if not more fun, to draw a character, actually doing something. I like evoking emotion out of the viewer. I like being able to make people feel something. And just this shot, you know, I feel worried. She looks nervous. What is on the other side of that sword, you know? What is she facing that has her looking so unconfident? That's fun. So yeah, I really liked how these little sketches came out. Fun little just doodle practice, working in grayscale. These little winglings behind her here, don't mind the fact that I totally fucked up her, like, whole torso. And her face doesn't look great here either. This is one of the weaker doodles of the combo I got. But her winglings back there. So her semblance is flight. I have no harder rules than just flight. It wouldn't be just she can fly. There'd be limitations to it. Like, maybe she can just glide, really, kind of like in Genshin Impact. You know, you jump off a high place and you can glide around. But you know, her semblance was the hardest thing for me to think about. But I did want to think of one for her, and flying was kind of a decent enough important element in the original story. You know, in The Ugly Duckling, that I had no better thing to pull from. And I wanted her to feel agile. So I didn't want her to be like tanky or something like Yang. And it doesn't help that, one, semblances aren't hereditary anyway, so I couldn't even consider Qrow or Tai's semblance if I wanted to. But also, I don't even know what Tai's semblance is. So that's not helpful. So yeah, I went with a vague idea of flight to roll with her bird theme without also just having her be able to turn into a bird, so then Qrow can still feel magical in that regard. Her sword, you may notice, is very similar to Qrow's sword. What's its name? Harbinger? I think it's called Harbinger. Yeah, I wanted her to, you know, it's a sword with a pistol in the grip. It doesn't bend down, like, you know how when Qrow fires, his sword, like, bends down to reveal the muzzle. So it always looks really stupid whenever Qrow shoots anything. And so I opted for a more Blake-like, you know, the sword is just, the grip is also a sword, a gun, you know, easy peasy. You can shoot, or you can stab. Easy peasy. But yeah, I figured she'd fight with a sword because, one, I didn't want her to be fisticuffs like Yang. And two, I didn't want her to use a scythe like RWBY. But I wanted her to be close to her dad's, and the only weapon left is Qrow's sword. So yeah, I figured she'd kind of fight similar to Qrow in sword form. Very fast, very agile. And yeah, just but without without the ability for it to transform into a scythe, because He never does that anyway. It's worthless to do that. Just sword, sword plus gun. And I think incorporating flight into that kind of fighting style could be really neato. You know, she could be really zippy. Kinda similar to Ren or Blake in that regard. Sorry, she just looks so cute. I really like this picture of her. Let me know. I don't see a whole lot of children. Like, I drew character's child. I don't see a whole lot of that kind of fan art. Let me know if that's something you guys think is fun to do. So, working in monochrome like this, personally, I prefer to just use no more than 3 shades of gray, like a light, dark, and medium gray. Usually it is more like this, where it's just a medium gray, and then like a dark gray, and then just white, you know? And that was something I had to kind of get used to doing, because I was used to feeling like I needed to have a million shades of gray to make sure everything was clear. But that wasn't very sustainable for my comics. And I had to let myself become comfortable with the fact that not everything on a character needs to have its own distinct shade of gray on it. You know, a couple of shades to differentiate, you know, important elements, and then also values will do the job. There is no one right way to do art, like how I always say. If you like doing monochrome with strictly just black and white, good. That looks good. I wish I could do that better. So yeah, I really like working with monochrome. It's a fun thought experiment to try to figure out what parts would be what value on a character. And I think she translates to black and white really well. And yeah, that's Quill. I think she's a real cutie patootie. I love how the colors look on her. I feel like she fits into the world of RWBY pretty well. This isn't necessarily the most efficient outfit in terms of combat, but also I didn't want her to be particularly efficient, since she doesn't really know if she wants to do combat. And I'm not sure if this is great for cosplay either. That vest is probably impossible to find, but making a vest yourself is probably one of the easier things to sew. Anyway, I'm gonna stop jabber-jawing, let you just look at the pretty art, and I hope you had fun!